So, welcome to Veritas Group's live Q&A event on everything you've ever wanted to know about fundraising. I'm Andy, so I'm the Managing Director of the UK and Europe office for the Veritas Group. So I'll kind of be your compere, your host today. I'll be working behind the scenes just to try and get the questions to Jeff and Richard. So what I want you to do throughout the session is just to pop your questions in the Q&A section on this webinar, and I will do my best to try and go through them one at a time and post them to Jeff and Richard to see if they can answer them. See if you can pose a question that they don't have the answer to. That'd be a fun one. But this is a great opportunity, so please do take it. Ask whatever it is you want to know, and I will do, I say, my best to get through as many of them as possible. This session is recorded, so you should get a copy of this tomorrow to watch back. So I don't think you have to try and make too many notes from it. If you want to watch it back, you can and find out the answer to your question then. So let's begin with a brief introduction from Jeff and Richard. Across to Jeff first.
Oh, okay. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and I'm principal at Veritas Group. Gosh, Richard, been doing this over 32 years.
I know, you're really old.
And, I started out my career working in the nonprofit side as a development director for two nonprofits over a span of 8 years. And then actually went to work for Richard at a direct response agency based in Seattle called Domain Group, and worked with Richard and a whole team of folks for over a dozen years. And then Richard and I came together in 2009. And Richard, you want to give a little?
So I've been doing this work for about 45 years. I hope I don't look it. That's why I shaved my hair off.
I would only say like 40.
Yeah, I should lie and say less. But like Jeff, I've been a development director as well. So both of us have experienced fundraising and things right on the ground. And so we know what that's like with large and small organizations. And then another gentleman and I started the organization that Jeff was talking about, direct marketing firm. We actually had an office in London down by Trafalgar Square, and it was a very successful business. We sold that in 2005, and I kept going and started Veritas Group, and then Jeff joined in 2009. And boy, Jeff, we've covered a lot of ground in all those years in terms of things that we've seen and things that we've done, and it's been a good ride. I think
hopefully we have a little bit of wisdom to depart.
I know we do. I mean,
a little bit.
Seems like we might have some, but we'll see.
Oh, brilliant. Well, great. Well, thank you for both joining and taking your time today. Really appreciate it. It's a great chance to find out just some wisdom from these guys. So say if you do have any questions, just drop them in the Q&A box and I'll kind of go through them one at a time. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with one question. The question is, how do we best move donors from one fundraiser to another? Kind of an extra comment just says, our donors come to look upon us as a friend and then don't understand when we tell them they will now be looked after by somebody else. How can we make this a better transition for donors, or should we be looking at sort of a blended caseload? I'm going to throw that one across to you, Richard.
Well, this happens often when a fundraiser leaves the organization, and you've got to make that transition. I think the main thing is to have a logical reason why you want to do it. I'd be very careful about switching donors around among caseloads if it's just like sort of like, well, we want to lighten the load here or something. And there's some reason that doesn't have some weight to it. But our position has always been to just be very honest about what's going on. James is leaving and Ian is going to be taking his place, and this is what's going on. And you just talk about it very, very openly. And you deal with the uncertainty and the what would I say, the concern that the donor has about not being cared for the same way the other person did it. But in fact, we have quality people, and you don't need to worry about this. And by the way, I mean, the authority figure could also say, And I'm here to talk to you if you have any concerns about the new person or whatever, and get on it. But authenticity and honesty is always the best way to approach it.
I think I would add too that in the best case scenario, you would want the MGO that is leaving, the major gift officer, to introduce the new
Mm-hmm.
person, if that's possible. If they're leaving on good terms, that would be the best case scenario where you would have the person who has the relationship introducing the new person. Now that doesn't always available, but that would be the best case scenario, I think. But and the other thing is to realize when you're setting up the overall program to understand that the donor is supposed to be mostly connected to the organization and the mission, and then the relationship with the gift
Yep.
officers.
Secondarily, yep.
In other words, they're not their best buddy. They're not their best friend. Even though, yes, you want to have a relationship with that donor. If the donor would leave because the MGO leaves, something's
That's
wrong.
exactly. You've set it up wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think that the whole point about being a best friend with a donor is something that you got to be very cautious and controlled, because that doesn't usually end well.
Great. Brilliant. I've got another question here. I think this one's going to be an interesting one for you both. What could a truly engaging event look like for major donors post-COVID?
Oh boy, they said the event word, Jeff.
Yeah. For major donors. Well, one, that the major gift team is not involved in in setting it up, taking it down, any of that work. What happens in many nonprofits is that they get this idea we need to do an event. And they say, okay, major gift team, we need you to put this on. And so they're involved in the planning, in the day of, all of the stuff. So think about this, you have your major gift officers who are supposed to be cultivating a portfolio of donors. And now you're saying, let's take them away from that and plan this event that we all know at the end of the day is not going to net out very much. So, and that event, depending on the scale of it, could take 2-3 months away for the major gift officer on their portfolio. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, you're taking that chunk of time away to cultivate those donors. So if you're going to have any event, and we're not anti-event if you see what this event, put it in proper perspective. If you look at it as a cultivation or an acquisition tool, to help further your brand, to help let other people know about your mission, that's fine. But don't get your major gift team involved in it. So the best scenario is that all the major gift officer does is invite certain donors in their portfolio who they think would benefit from the event to that event.
I think the other thing I would say about events is most events go wrong because the person attending the event is going there for the event, not the cause.
Yeah.
And so in fact, we have a paper we've written on that you got to be sure that the content of the event is about the cause, your cause. Now, you might be saying, as you hear me say that, well, of course it is, because we're doing a run for cancer or feeding or whatever your thing is. No, they're coming to do the run, not necessarily because they care about the feeding. Now, you think they do, but in all the analysis we've done over all the years, and we've done this analysis in Europe and in Canada, United States, event donors are low quality donors. They're just low quality. They are, because most of them are not cause oriented. They're event oriented. So you got to be very careful about the content of the event.
Right. All right, Bill. Another one for you, Richard. Then, how do I deal with donors that won't answer or won't connect with me?
Well, that's a clear sign they don't want to talk to you, right? So you ought to move on. I know
Well,
that
hold on.
sounds
You just
well. Put them
get
in.
rid of them. No, hold
Put them
on.
in. Put them in direct mail. That's what I mean by that. I mean, and you should try different. I mean, we have a whole system for qualifying donors that's like 7 steps.
Yeah.
So it's not. So I'm assuming, Andy, that when the person behind that question would say, I've tried 6 or 7 times, but have you done it? Have you done the email route, the text route, all of that stuff? Jeff,
Well,
what would you add to that?
that's an important point you just said, that you are assuming they've done the 6 or 7. And I would say I'm not assuming that, because most people that I've talked to that try to either qualify donors or say the same thing. I can't get a hold of my donor. And when I ask them, well, how many times have you reached out? Well, twice.
Yeah, that's not enough.
We immediately think, we create stories in our head that the donor should, when we call them or reach out, that they're right there at their desk, ready
Just
to pick up
dying
the
to talk
call and
to us.
say, hey, but they're not. And so the key is to be patient and persistent. And we always say it's going to take 7 to 9 tries to try to reach a donor. It
Mm-hmm.
just is. And in many cases, when we talk to people, they say, you know what? It wasn't until the 5th or 6th try that I actually got someone on the phone or actually responded to one of my emails.
But here's the other reality is, and this is so depressing and disappointing to most folks, that 1 out of every 3 donors that qualifies, that you're trying to, I mean, that meets the criteria for giving,
Mm-hmm.
1 out of every 3 actually wants to talk to you.
That
One
is
out of
right.
every 3.
That is right.
And so you're going to get 2 no's and before you get a yes. And so my rather cavalier statement at the beginning of this section was basically, well, move on, meaning that once
Yeah,
you discover that, oh, that's one of those that doesn't want to talk to me, they just don't want to talk to you.
that's right.
They would rather deal with things in a different way. That's
Now,
just the reality.
the other thing, Richard, that I think we should add, because you've written about this a lot, and that is, might one of the reasons they're not wanting to talk with you is because you've previously have not given them anything of value to want them to talk to you about. And that's another key part, is how are you cultivating and stewarding this donor right
Mm-hmm.
now? Are you in tune with their passions and interests? Are you feeding them information and touch points around those passions and interests? And if you're not, the donor may be perceiving that, you know what, I'm not getting anything of value. Why would I talk to this person? So think about that as well. Like, what have you been doing to cultivate that person previously?
Great. That kind of brings us full circle back around to the question about events. There was kind of a follow-up question from it, just saying, well, if we're not doing events, how do we engage with major donors in a personal way and show them the impact their support is making?
Well, that's the fundamental question.
Yes.
Richard, you want to take
Well,
this one?
yeah, I mean, that's where your quality, you're basically doing an assessment of what their potential is. Like if they've given recently and given a lot, you might try to engage with that donor, and if they're one of the donors that wants to engage, then you develop a personal relationship with them. It's very labor intensive, it is, but the point is that personal engagement with donors that want to talk to you, that have inclination, in other words, they want to support you and they have the ability to support you at a greater level, makes the economics of the whole thing work. And so that's what we suggest that you do.
So in practical manner, that would mean this. So write this down or see the video later. But as Richard just said, you want to first start with qualified donors. So if a donor hits a mark that says, oh, I think they might be a major donor, whatever that is for your organization, 1,000 pounds, 5,000 pounds, 10,000, whatever that is, they've hit this mark. Well, they're not yet someone that you would put in a portfolio. You need to qualify them, and there's a whole process for that. And you can go to our website and get that whole process free. But then once you have a qualified caseload, you are then going to tier those donors A, B, and C. You're going to create a revenue goal for every donor and a strategic plan for the next 12 months for each donor. And how are you going to achieve the goal? This is the structure, the basic structure you need. And then you're going to work the plan. That's the whole thing. And when you work the plan with your portfolio of donors and you have revenue goals and all of those things, you will start to develop relationships with them. They'll develop trust in you, and they will start giving larger and larger gifts because you've created that relationship with them. This is how you build the program. Not having an event here and there to try to like connect with them at the event. Those are nice things maybe, but that is not how you're going to develop a relationship. It is having that structure and then working the plan that you set out to do for them.
Right. Well, right, another question for you, Jeff, from Katie. She's asking, how do we best balance a small caseload between only 2 staff members? So there's 2 staff members. We're struggling to find the best balance with around 750 donors.
Well, 750 donors between 2 people, even that's too many
It is.
to actually cultivate. So the first step is I would split it up first in what I would call caseload pools. These are 750 donors, so you'd split them up between the 2. And if you're both able to work full time on this, I'm just making these assumptions. But from that list, you're going to cull it down when you're going through the qualification process. And remember what Richard said, only 1 in 3 donors will want to relate to you. So you may end up somewhere between 125 donors each that actually end up on your portfolio. And then from there, that's what I just said. You start creating that plan, that structure, and a plan for them all for the whole 12 months. And therefore, then you can start moving through those donors and start developing relationships.
So I would add just one thing to that, Jeff, is take the 750, Katie, and do some analysis of them. Because if of that 750, let's say 50 of them have never given,
oh
and
yeah,
they are not, you should take them off the list in terms of portfolio thing. Then divide it down.
very good.
It's in the first cycle, first time you do this, it's a very tedious thing, and so you just got to get your mind ready for it. But let me tell you, once it's done, it's a beautiful system and process that focuses on the personal relationship, the authentic personal relationship with the donor, which then does some unbelievable things in terms of your relationship.
And Andy, maybe you could put our website in the chat box so that folks can go and download. We have white papers that can take you through this process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're great. I can't get enough of them. I remember when I first started my Veritas journey, those white papers were excellent. I still read the blog posts today. They come to my email. I'll still read them.
Well, I hope you do.
Checking.
The requirement for employment.
Yeah. But no, seriously, if you're not signed up to that blog, I totally recommend it. It's just great advice. I spoke to somebody yesterday when I was in London, and they were saying that they get it and they read it every day. And just great tidbits just to keep you on track and keep you focused on doing things the Veritas way. Great. So another question, kind of a more general one. I'm going to throw this across to you, Richard. How do I make a major donor increase their gift?
Present something to them that they value and that they want. Now, this sounds so simplistic, but it's so interesting to Jeff and me that this doesn't happen more often. In fact, I was in a meeting several days ago, and that same question was asked, and it was basically, well, what's the donor like to do? What do they want to do? What have you found out about them? I mean, we as human beings always do what we want to do, mostly, and if we can. So that would be it, is to have donor offers. And by the way, there's white papers on donor offers at that website as well. So that have a donor offer that basically matches what the interests and passions of the donor. If you present that to them and present a vision that is big and bold to them, and by big and bold, I mean you're asking bold and big, because it has some vision to it, you're going to get a positive response. We see so often, and Jeff, you might have stories about this, where the donor is interested in category number one in the organization, that all they get from us is information on categories 3 and 5.
Right.
And I don't know, Jeff. I mean, I've just never understood why it doesn't dawn on people that, why are you sending them 3 and 5 when they're interested in one? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Now, in some cases, they're doing that because one information on one's not available because the program people haven't given information. But the closer you align your offer to the interests and passions of the donor, the more success you will have. I mean, it's just about that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd add first, first of all, you never make a donor do anything. So, that is, so what I want to get to the point there is that you as a frontline fundraiser, you're the bridge. Think of yourself as the bridge between the donor and their desire to change the world through your organization, and then all the programs and projects you have that are doing just that. And you are that person who's bringing them together. And you're bringing them together by really understanding the donor, as Richard said, understanding what their passions and interests are, why they have them, so that you can, here's all the great things we're doing. And I think you'll be interested because of this story you told me. That's where the magic happens in Major Gifts. That's your job as a frontline fundraiser, is to bring those two together. And that's why Richard and I always say, you have the best job in the world. How many people get to do something like that, where you get to help a donor find joy in their giving and then also do great things in the world at the same time? I mean, it's an amazing thing. But you never make a donor do anything. You're a facilitator of that thing coming together. And it's a beautiful, mystical thing when it does.
Right.
Thank you. Another question then. We're starting a legacy program. Who should we target on our database to ask about this?
Yeah. Well, I wish our director of planned giving services, Robert Shaffis, was here, but I will channel him through this. The first thing he would say is, what he would look at is donors that have been on your file for the last 10 to 25, 35 years. So if you have donors in your donor file that have been with you for many, many years, at least over 10 years, and they've been giving consistently over that time, those people are your number one target. Regardless of a gift size, it's length of the file. How long have they been on your file the longest?
And the principle behind that is that they're showing continued interest. I mean,
absolutely,
that's what's going on.
They're loyal. They see
stuck to
something about your organization over the years that they just love. And those are the people that are more apt to leave you a legacy.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a communication from a fundraiser this week who was saying they received an email from somebody who's not even a donor, but they've been receiving information from the organization for 20 plus years. Wow. And now that person wants to leave a legacy gift.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's amazing. That person's never given a gift, but now all of a sudden they want to leave a legacy.
Never even given a gift.
Never even given a gift, but they've been receiving the information from the organization for 20 plus years.
That's awesome.
Right. I've got a bit of a budgeting question for you, Richard, now. So I think this is a kind of a common theme that we're seeing in the UK at the moment. So person saying we have a gap of 100,000 in our budget this year because of a surprising gift we had last year. How do we make up for that big gap this year?
Well, I've got two answers. One is don't ever budget a surprising gift in next year's budget.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be mean or anything. It's that's a common mistake. Uh, so, like, let's say you get a £1 million gift. You do not want to include that in your budgeting for next year. It should not even exist. So next time, don't do that. But now you've done it, and so that's fine. I think the best thing to do is basically is to come up with projects or donor offers that are compelling, that are the most popular ones in your donor file that people respond to, and make it a little mini campaign to raise that money. You might also go back to the donor that gave the 100,000 and talk to them about additional expansion of the very thing that they were involved in the first place, that gave them that gift.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, a donor who gives a gift like that will give another one.
Yeah.
Jeff, what would you add to that?
I think the only thing I would add, that was perfect, but the only thing I would add is to look at everyone in your portfolio, if you have that, and look at the goals that you have set. And I would try to see, is there some donors that could give more? Like, let's just say you have a goal of 10,000 for a donor. Could they give 12.5 or 15? And go down the row of all of your donors in your portfolio to see if you could do a little, what we would call a stretch goal, to see if you could make up for that 100,000 by going through every one of those donors and say, if I did a little bit more, if I brought in a stronger offer, could that person give more, and see if you could make up the gap amount.
Well, and one thing, do not in your messaging call it a gap.
No, yeah. We're 100,000 down because we made a mistake in budgeting.
Yeah, you don't
offer.
want to do that. But you want to have it focus on programs. This is what we need to get done.
Yeah.
This year, and it's compelling, and you're talking about it in human and emotional terms. I like Jeff's idea where you're going to every donor and asking them to stretch, and you've planned that out. So maybe the sum of all the stretches equals 100,000 pounds.
Yeah.
That's how I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but coming back around to what you said about budgets, Richard, I think that's really important, that the fundraiser has to be involved in making the budget for the year.
Yeah.
If they're not involved, then you are going to end up with these holes because.
Yeah, that's an important point. And Richard and I are big advocates of this.
Yep, bottom up. Yep.
Yeah. So use bottom up projections for your budget, not top down. And, because this happens all the time. The fundraiser is told what their next year's goal is. Well, you raised £1 million this year. I think you should do 20% more. Just based on
what?
Yeah, not based on anything.
Yeah, a nice cup of tea. So
what we always advocate is that the fundraiser goes through everyone in their portfolio, set the goals by each individual, and look at where we come out. Does it meet the management expectations? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You have discussions back and forth and say, well, you said that donor could only bring in 50,000. Maybe is it possible for 75? And you have the discussion. You know what? Actually, yes, we could probably ask for 75 this year if we did X, Y, Z. But that's how those kind of decisions should be made, and as far as budgeting and what the goals should be. Not somebody saying randomly, well, 10, 20, you're doing great. You should be able to do 30% more,
Well, I mean, that whole topic is so interesting, Jeff, because it's like, so we all know that money comes from donors, institutional donors and individual donors. Money comes from donors. So wouldn't it be logical that you would take donors into account
Yeah.
to figure out your forecast. I mean, you wouldn't on a personal basis. Not, let's say you're now earning, I'm just going to make this up, 20,000 pounds a year. Hopefully you're doing a little better than that, but let's say 20,000 pounds a year. And you just arbitrarily, you decide, you wake up one morning and you decide, well, I think this next year is going to be 40,000 and I'm going to start spending on it.
Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is that?
I
Commercial
know.
companies go back to the customers. How many customers? And so it's how many customers do we have? How many do we need to get?
Yeah.
Now that's another question. How many donors do we have? How many donors do we need to get in order to reach these types of goals? Uh, that's a nuance that you ought to have in the budgeting. But uh, doing these, just throwing these numbers out. We had a situation um, last year where an organization had just announced the goals, a 10-year forecast, a 10-year forecast
Yeah.
with millions and millions of dollars attached just randomly to each of these offices. And we went in there and studied it, and basically out of that combined forecast of four offices, took out about $18 million in the next 3 years because there was no way they were going to get it.
Yeah.
So it's a very important topic. Yep.
Great. I'm going to drop the dreaded C bomb now. Cost of living, not the other C bomb that you're thinking of. The cost of living crisis. This is obviously something in the UK, big hot topic that there's less money in the economy, people are struggling financially. Do you think the cost of living is affecting donations, or is it our lower expectations that affect donations?
Probably both. I mean, yeah, I think the economy does affect how people give, especially on the lower dollar donors. Um, Less so on the upper end of the file, the mid and majors. But yes, the economy will affect especially lower dollar donors and just perceptions of things. People tend to pull back if they think the economy's not so great, and you'll see even major donors hold back their gifts for a time until they feel better about the stock market, different things like that. But on the other side of that is that we as fundraisers use that as an excuse not to ask, not to cultivate, because we think, well, everyone's hurting. People don't want to give. We create these stories in our head. People don't want to give. Therefore, maybe we should hold off asking because, the economy's not great right now. Well, that's a story we create in our own heads. The fact is that if you have a compelling offer, if you've engaged them and they see that you bringing value to them, those donors still want to talk to you. They still want to give.
Well, and there's one other element too,
Yeah.
Jeff, that we've experienced. Donors that are not affected economically, which a number of them aren't, will make up for, if asked, for the donors that are affected economically. So, Jeff, we've been through. In the other days of the direct marketing firm in the early '90s, there was a big recession. I can't remember what year it was. We've been through the 2008
Yes.
situation in the U.S. And recently, and during the whole COVID thing, all of our clients had an increase, a combined average increase of what was it, 23%?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like that. So all that to say is keep pressing on and offer compelling offers that match the donor's passions and interests, and talk honestly and openly about what needs to be done. It's amazing what donors will do, and this is a transcultural thing. It's not just a U.S. thing. It's amazing what donors will do to pick up the slack in order to help the planet and help the people on the planet, the animals on the planet, the things that they care about. They will do amazing things
Mm-hmm.
if you ask them to.
That's right.
And so we have not actually experienced that whole business of a downturn, because we have focused instead on reminding donors of what needs to be done that is close to their hearts.
That's right.
Good stuff. Right, I have another question here from Cullen. He's saying, what would be your top two, three recommendations for a development shop of one? I'm in the early days of establishing a new program with less than 300 donors. So what would kind of be your top recommendations if you were coaching Cullen? Richard?
Um, I would analyze those donors and put them in a hierarchy of value. In other words, actual value versus what their net worth is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I might pay attention to that net worth business if you have that information, but actual value. And I would tier those donors so that you have in the A slot the few that could actually contribute significantly, and the B slot the next level down. And we have a whole paper on that tiering business, so you could get that. But in other words, you're trying to focus your time on the high inclination donors.
Yeah.
So that would be the first focus, is get those 300 donors and figure out where you are with them. The second one is I would be working very diligently to be sure that the donors that I have are know beyond a shadow of a doubt that their giving is making a difference, because you want to retain it.
Mm-hmm.
And third is I would be setting up a situation or problem for those donors that I want them to give to. So that would be another point. And then the lastly, I'd be figuring out how to acquire more donors. I have four things,
Yeah.
not three.
I think that's spot on. I think you have to look at it as the donor journey, the donor pipeline to major gifts. You know, where do you have, where are you spending your time? And with 300 donors, as Richard said, you want to spend it with the top tier donors first, but you always have to be looking at how are we bringing donors in,
Yeah.
moving them up over time, and so that's how I'd look at it. Always be looking like, how is my donor pipeline? I've got these 300. I know what to do with those. I'm tiering all of them, but then how are we bringing donors in consistently?
Yeah.
And so how would you, oh, sorry, go ahead,
No,
Richard.
go ahead, Ray.
I was just going to say, how would you split your time then? That's a good question. How would you split your time between donor acquisition, ensuring that you're managing donors, etc.? How do you divide the time up, especially if you're a small team?
Maybe 70% with the current donors and 30% on acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The it's always amazing to me how we don't pay attention to our current donors and tell them that they made a difference to the extent that we retain and upgrade them.
Right.
I mean, when you actually look at your pool of major donors, what's the whole agenda with those people? To be sure they know in their spirit and in their hearts that their giving made a difference, so that they want to actually do more, and then to help them do more by asking them to do more.
Yeah.
That's that thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, how do we get new ones?
Right.
And we've seen so many situations where people are doing the first thing and they're not thinking about the second thing. And
Right.
it's like, okay, come on. You expect to stay alive and not be thinking about donor acquisition? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You've got to pay attention to this.
Right. I've got a direct question here about the Veritas way. It's saying, why do Veritas have an intro process that includes writing to donors? Why can't we just call or WhatsApp them? It's easier and cheaper.
Well, all donors respond to different things. We like the initial letter because it's very, very personal. And over time, we have found that it's very responsive, especially if you follow that letter up with an email or a phone call or a text. And so that initial letter is very personal. It's handwritten, not a handwritten letter, but a handwritten envelope. Because it'll get opened. And it's telling the donor, oh, they've spent some time on this. This isn't something they just mass produced. They've actually spent time thinking about this. So that's why we talk about sending a letter as the first initial contact.
Great. I kind of a follow-up question again then from something you just said previously. How do you know a donor's inclination to give if you don't have any information about the donor except for their monthly giving amount and how long they have been giving?
Well, that's what we mean by inclination, what they're giving.
Hmm.
So I'm sorry about not defining that. Inclination is not, the definition of inclination in this context is not, oh, Andy has told me he's inclined to give more. No, his behavior has told me, because he's giving monthly, that he's inclined to give. And if I ask him and he gives more, then he's also showing by his behavior that he's inclined to give more.
Hmm.
So that's what we mean by inclination.
Yeah.
Now, on the upper end of the file, upper end meaning the people that are giving more, you're actually asking them
Yeah.
questions. So don't be curious. I mean, that's the other thing. People are not curious enough.
Yeah, and that's something that we can help you do at Veritas. That if you're interested in figuring out the donors that you should be targeting, our free donor assessment will help you pick out the top donors that you should be working with. The
Mhm.
system we use is brilliant at doing that. So if you want to find out about that, you can enter our website and request your free donor assessment. Another question, this one, a bit of a different one. How do I get past gatekeepers, i.e., secretaries, partners, sons of donors who aren't giving me access?
Well, again, I think it goes back to being patient and persistent. And also, are you trying different ways to engage them through meaningful connections, other touch points that you're sending? But yeah, it's one of those things where you just have to keep at it in a respectful way. And then over time, if you're not getting there, you have to move on.
I think the other thing is does that donor have a friend or a colleague that you know or that you can get to so you can have the whole referral thing happening? I mean, that's a tactic that's often used as well, to get around the person. Um, Oftentimes, gatekeepers also are looking at the material that's sending and matching it and making a judgment about how close that material is in terms of its content to the interests of the person they're gatekeeping.
Hmm.
And so then they might say, well, hey, Mary, you ought to look at this because it really is, because they know that it's really interesting to them. So that would be another clue is like, well, what does this person give to and what are they interested in? And then how can I target my message? Don't send something general on the organization, but target it in terms of what they're interested in.
Great. Another question here. Do you have a structure or template for sort of a weekly report an MGO or MLO should be receiving in order to do their role successfully? So I think this question is speaking to what data should a fundraiser be getting to make sure that they're able to target the right donors, etc. Jeff?
Well, a weekly report. I mean, there's a number of number of tools. One that first you need as a frontline fundraiser, you need a plan. You need a plan for your donors, and you can actually download one from our Veritas site called the DEP, the Donor Engagement Plan. This helps you set up your portfolio correctly, helps goals and plans for every one of your donors. So that's one thing. Where are you going? That's what you need to know. So that every day you walk in the office, you turn on the computer, you know exactly what you're doing that day. The next is making sure you have a good CRM system so you understand where donors are today. And, if gifts are coming in, you know exactly that those gifts came in. You have a place to put all of your notes and information so that you know and everyone in your organization knows who your donor is, what the interactions you've had, all of those things. And then on an ongoing basis, at least monthly, we want to get an updated report for how donors are doing compared to their goals. So that CRM system should be able to spit out a report to you telling you where your donors are at. And then what we do quarterly for our clients is take all that information and update our clients on each of the frontline fundraisers, their caseload, how do they do this year versus last year versus goal, so that leadership can see the progression of how that major gift officer, mid-level officer is performing and how the donors are responding. So that's kind of the basics. I don't know, Richard, if you have anything else you want to add there.
No, while you were talking, I was just agreeing with what you were saying, but I was also thinking about the underlying philosophy of fundraising and one's view of money. I mean, we haven't addressed that in this conversation yet.
Yeah.
And I'd like to just spend like a minute or so just talking about that. But it's this whole thing about money, and we've had a lot of experience in the UK in terms of the culture and all of that stuff. But it's like money is a delicate topic. And people would say about Americans as well, we're aggressive about talking about money, and I don't know, Andy, if you would agree that the British folks are more conservative about talking about money. Would that be true?
I don't know, I'm Irish. I'm not sure I can speak into that.
But let's just say, I mean, this whole topic about money is such an important thing to understand, that your goal as a fundraiser is to help the donor fulfill what's in their hearts and in their spirits about what they want to do on the planet. If you do that right, money is a result. So you're really not trying to get the money. What you're trying to do is help the donor as a partner do what they want to do on the planet. And if you can make that kind of switch in your head, it'll be a whole different dynamic in terms of how you approach your donors. It's very important to do it that way. So I just want to throw that into this whole thing about, I mean, CRM is an important topic, and managing data is a very important topic as well. So everything Jeff said about that is very critical. But if you have a very small donor list, you might just have to manage it on an Excel document, which is also fine, as long as you've got what the data is. That's very, very critical.
I think that's why the DEP is so good, because even if your CRM is not great, the DEP gives you an opportunity to have that information in one central place so you can keep monitoring it and you know what you're doing month by month, day by day. If you follow the plan, you'll get the results. For another question here, my manager wants me to be prospecting for major donors, but I don't think I have enough time. What would you do? Richard?
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Well, it's our firm belief that major donors come from current donors.
Okay.
Not so prospecting for major donors is a little difficult concept with us, because we're not aligned to that notion that you're going to go out and just find major donors, out in the marketplace somewhere. You're going to find them in your donor file, which is why acquisition is so important, because you're trying to get donors in, and once they've given, they're already starting to self-qualify as people interested in your cause, and that's the pool you ought to be looking at to do the major donor thing. Jeff, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd love to know more about how many people they're currently cultivating in their portfolio and all of those things, because you cannot, if you have a full portfolio of 150 donors, have time to go out and try to prospect or find new donors. There's no need. because you have a full portfolio already. And if you're working that properly and working that plan, you would not have time. It is intense to
Mm-hmm.
work at that portfolio. Remember, those are the donors that have already raised their hand and said, hey, I love what you guys do. They've already been qualified. You have them in your portfolio. You are working them. I don't know what it is about leadership that feels like they always have to have new people. Well, I don't like those old donors. I want the new people. I know there's more wealthy people in our community. It's crazy. But leadership loves that. They don't like the current donors for some reason. We love current donors, but we're not doing enough with them. That's the whole thing. And so we're saying to you, if you have a full portfolio, love those donors, serve them well. And there's no need then for you to go out and find new people, because the donors you have will supply all your needs. So, so cultivate the
Well,
ones that are with you, serve
yeah,
them well.
and here's another point on that is because I just dealt with this situation in Asia on this whole topic with a client that we're working with. But it goes like this. So let's go acquire some donors, and the acquisition offer is going to be make a pledge. And I said, well, how's a person going to move from a cold position of not being a donor to jumping in and making a monthly pledge? I mean, that's a huge leap. Well, that's what we've been doing. Well, how's that been going for you? Well, not very well. So we changed it to putting out the problem and the social need and all that other stuff and asking just for one gift of $10 or $25. And they had a huge response. And then out of that, cultivate and ask for the monthly gift out of that pool.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of that pool, go for the major gifts. That's how it should work. There's a system and process. You don't go out into the public square and say, well, hey, Nigel, how about giving us 10,000 pounds? It just doesn't work that way. I mean, it may like every 1,000 years, but we're not going to be around for that event. It's going to be a long haul. So that's why you need this acquisition thing, and you need a whole cultivation thing, because out of that pool is where you're going to get your major donor.
Right. Okay. More time for one last question. I'm going to throw this one across to you, Jeff. I want to start a mid-level program. We've got a ton of monthly donors, and I can see the value in working with them, but my development director isn't sold. What can I do to convince them that a mid-level program is the way forward?
Well, we've had a lot of success working with clients who have a ton of sustainers, monthly pledgers, and put them in a mid-level program. You don't stop their pledge, but on top of what they're doing on their monthly pledge, we're introducing them to a person that's starting to reach out to them in a more one-to-one way. And when that happens, you start seeing higher number of pledges. So they go from 50 pounds to 100 pounds a month. We start seeing extra gifts. We start seeing donors realizing, oh, I didn't realize you needed 5,000 pounds for this. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying is that don't be afraid to overlay a mid-level program over your pledge program, because many good pledgers will continue their pledge and in addition give more gifts, and you'll be deepening that relationship with the donor to start giving beyond that monthly to some big gifts for some of them. So we've had tremendous success, and we always recommend in a mid-level program, because we always get that question, should we put our sustainers in that mid-level program? We always say yes. Absolutely.
Great. All right, bro. Well, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our time. Any final thoughts? Either of you want to share? Any tidbits of information you think would be good to throw out?
Well, I would say, and you've heard us talk about having a system in your fundraising, and the overall system that's not that is for the whole program is basically acquisition, making sure you have acquisition going, a cultivation program for those donors acquired, the mid-level thing, major gifts, and the legacy thing. A system, and it needs to be balanced. If you don't have that in your organization, no matter how large or small, then you're going to be in trouble. And then within that are these subsystems, and in the mid and major gifts, we've been addressing that. It's about qualifying donors and moving them up in mid-level, and then it's about personal relationships in the major gift and legacy level. And overall, it's about having the right view of what the role of money in a person's life. That would be my summation. Jeff?
Yeah. I would just encourage everyone who's been on this webinar. First, thanks for joining us. It's awesome that you came to us today. I just want to encourage you. You have a really tough job. It is hard work. And it can be you can get easily discouraged because there's a lot of rejection in this work. But as Richard's been in this 45 years, I've been in it over 32 years. The key is to understand that if you're patient and persistent and you're trying to serve the donor well, good things happen out of that.
They do.
Having that plan and structure that Richard talked about is critical for you to develop those relationships, both with donors and then also with your internal staff. That's why it's so hard what you do, because you have to be friends with everyone in a sense. And I just encourage you to keep with it. Stay with it, be patient, persistent, cultivate, steward, and serve donors well, and you'll be rewarded for that.
Yes, it's true.
Well, great. Well, thank you for being with us today, everybody. It's been fantastic. Thank you all for your questions. As I said, you're going to receive an email with this recording on by tomorrow, and that'll give you a chance to watch it back. If you want to learn more, find out how we can support you, you can contact me, Andy, at veritasgroup.co.uk, or follow any of the web links that we've put in the chat. Great to have you all.